Hey, what's going on, everyone? This is Mitch. Good Monday evening to you all. I hope you guys have had a great start to your week and a great Monday out there. In this evening's video, we're going to discuss the tropics. There's nothing to really latch on to as far as talking about a major system or anything, even just a tropical storm. What we are seeing is signs that the tropical Atlantic, what we call the MDR, which stands for Main Development Region, is starting to slowly wake up. This time of the year and this part of hurricane season, when we're really early in it, conditions out in this region of the North Atlantic typically aren't favorable for big time tropical development. A lot of things work against it. A lot of Saharan dust, which is dry air, trade winds, things like that. A lot of things work against these tropical systems from really developing. But we are starting to see some signs that there might be a favorable period here in the next, 6, 7, 10 days that something can get going. One of these tropical waves can actually survive and maybe get into the Caribbean and maybe bring some moisture to some of the Caribbean islands. But in general, is there a threat expected? I want to get this out of the way. Absolutely not. But it's just the signs that things are slowly starting to wake up. So that's what we're going to discuss. If you guys have not subscribed, consider doing that. Like the video if you like it. Appreciate the consistent viewership with you guys. I know a lot of people continue to view even when things are slow. So I really appreciate it, guys. It really keeps the fuel to this hobby going. So I really thank y'all for the support. If you guys got anything I can pray about, please put it in the comments below. It gives me the opportunity to pray over it, and it gives others an opportunity to do so too. If you're big on Facebook or Twitter, hit me up on there. It's a great way to interact with what I do. If you got anything that you need to discuss, talk about, prayer requests, non-weather or weather-related topics, just hit me up. I'm always there for you guys. So let's take a look at what's going on out in the North Atlantic. This is what we call the MDR, the Tropical Atlantic. This is the Caribbean, and this is the Gulf of Mexico, and this is off the coast of the Southeast, obviously. But you notice, and not a lot going on. Got some tropical moisture with a tropical system on the Pacific side. Not going to really talk about that, but you got some tropical moisture ongoing in areas of Central America. Not really a labeled system at all. We got a wave trying to sneak into the Eastern Caribbean, but it's definitely going to meet its demise, as we call this area the Caribbean, which is the Eastern Caribbean. We call it the Caribbean graveyard. It's basically where a lot of tropical systems, especially this time of the year, really get ripped apart due to favored trade winds, which means the wind patterns aloft really just aren't favorable for tropical development. They kind of rip apart anything that comes through this area. There might be a time frame here in the next 7 to 10 days where it lessens somewhat, which is not necessarily rare, but it's certainly uncommon for this time of the year in the Eastern Caribbean. We're going to see how that ends up happening and how that affects these tropical waves that I do think are going to start really coming off the coast of North Africa. You obviously have some Saharan dust, as you always do this time of the year, coming off north of north, I almost said North America, but northern areas of Africa, which is really typical for this time of the year. This tends to rip tropical development apart and dry it out, if you will. But another tropical wave and another one behind this in North Africa starting to come off the coast and working its way across the North Atlantic. And we'll see how these survive, but those are not expected to develop. And before we get going really deep into this, I want to mention note of new development is expected per the National Hurricane Center. So within the next 5 days, there's not anything that they're latching onto. Now I can almost guarantee you that they're watching what we're watching in the models. They're, they might say they aren't, but I'm sure they are. Everybody is seeing what we are seeing and what we are discussing. And of course, I'm not saying that they're saying they're not or anything like that, but in general, there is an idea that within the next 7 to 10 days, some stronger tropical waves can survive out here. But in general, this is not going to occur within the next 5 days. So what we're going to do is we're going to take a look at the European, the GFS, even the Canadian, just because we can compare it to the other models and see what it's showing. Take a look at the ensembles and then some of the factors environmental wise it's really playing into promoting or not promoting tropical development. So let's take a look at the Euro. As we're getting into this week, and not a whole lot going on. Any kind of tropical moisture that's working its way across the tropical Atlantic is not expected to do anything per models. I want to mention, watch this system right here. Something non-tropical kind of comes off the coast of the eastern U.S., and who knows, it could be sneaky and develop some tropical characteristics. Probably not, but we'll see how south this gets. But watch this a little bit later this week for sure. As we're getting into the weekend, to Friday and the weekend, here comes a tropical wave right here. See this just greenish area? That's all we can see. There's no real L popping up. This is the first tropical wave. Now I will mention, each tropical wave that makes it across, it dies out, but at the same, and I'll show you exactly what I'm about to say too here in a second, a better view. These waves are dying out, right? But behind it, it leaves a trail of moisture for the other tropical waves to kind of feed off of, if you will. So it's kind of like one tropical wave makes it across and then sacrifices itself due to the dry air, not literally, but you get what I'm saying. And behind it leaves a trail of more moist air that wasn't there when this worked through before. So that will actually help the other tropical system behind it, as it kind of gives it a little bit of a moisture bubble, if you will. That's why I think everybody's really watching this second wave. But here comes this first wave really slowly, kind of making its way into the Eastern Caribbean. There it goes, pops off that L right here, which symbolizes probably some kind of circulation, some kind of, is it going to be a tropical depression? I doubt it, but, we'll see. And then this starts to make its way into that hostile environment of the Eastern Caribbean, and then really doesn't do much at all. It just kind of plows right into areas of Central America. And then the Euro only goes 240 hours out, but it has another wave right here developing behind it. What does it do after this? We're not sure. But there's some pretty strong, I wouldn't say strong, but there's some heavy signal right here that this one might move a little bit more northeast, and some ensemble runs like this a little bit more. But you notice here comes another wave after this. So if you back this up in general, it really starts to, you just in general start to see more moisture down here. Now, these are going to track east to west, and that's due to the fact that you have big time high pressure, a ridging of high pressure up here in the North Atlantic, which is something we don't want to see in the heart of hurricane season. This will lead to a more, basically you're going to have a more favorable environment out here in the tropical Atlantic because you're going to get deeper into the hurricane season. So, these weak waves that aren't surviving, they're eventually going to start surviving. And with this kind of steering current that pushes them all into populated areas of the Caribbean and the Gulf of Mexico and then off the coast of the Southeast, we have to begin to watch for more dangerous scenarios. But for now, we're still in June. Not that big of a deal. We'll take a look at the GFS, which is kind of dead to me because it's just been unreliable. But we can still look at it as guidance, and it shows this first wave. Here comes this first wave. Makes it into the Caribbean. The timing's a little different, but of course the GFS, being what the GFS is a lot more aggressive with this. And in general, let's speed it back up. Gets this first wave into here, gets into the Eastern Caribbean, kind of survives. It's just one big plume of moisture that rides south of Jamaica, but it doesn't really do a whole lot with the second wave. You don't really see it. It's just kind of a plume of moisture. The Canadian, let's take a look at this. I will mention the Canadian is very aggressive with this little piece of energy that gets kind of pushed off, almost what's left over of a mesoscale convective system that is certainly possible later this week for areas in the mid-Atlantic and Northeast. We'll talk about that when the time is right. Gets off the coast of the Southeast and tries to turn to a strengthening low pressure. So we'll kind of watch that, but for now, we're not going to talk much on that. But here it comes, the Canadian. First wave right here starts to ride into the Eastern Caribbean, pops off an L temporarily. Showing that, hey, there is some kind of tropical entity out there, tropical system. But look what it does with the second one. Really tries to make it into its own system and starts to ride a little bit further north and strengthening somewhat into a pretty strong tropical wave or tropical depression, maybe even a low-end tropical storm as we get into about the 10-day range, starting to enter the Eastern Caribbean islands. So it's something we need, the Lesser Antilles is something we need to really watch out for. And is it a concern? Absolutely not. But it's a sign of things are starting to wake up out here. Now, a big time reason why, and really the only reason you have these really going east to west, is you see this, basically this big blob of red out here. That is a big, dominant high pressure out here in the North Atlantic. So it's pushing, the currents go like this around this high pressure. So any moisture down here is getting pushed this way. Now, depending on where the high is it anchored more into the southeast? Will it kind of protrude out here? Not sure, but this is starting to get set 8 and 10 days out. it's pretty hard to figure that out. And really, it doesn't matter at this range because we might not be even talking about any kind of system. But in general, the general storm track will be east to west. These things will not really be able to move northeast early on, which would pretty much be these tropical systems' demise very quickly with much cooler sea surface temperatures up here. So in general, and let me make this a little bit bigger for you guys. This is chances of a tropical depression here in the next, I would say 7 to 8 days. And it's pretty high with this this first tropical wave in the Eastern Caribbean. So that's a 55 to 70% chance of a tropical depression developing in this region. But then it picks up in this system behind it. But you notice it is riding a little bit more northwest. I think I said northeast earlier in the video. What I meant to say was northwest. But it's riding a little bit more northwest. And this is the second wave. So really it's two waves to watch. We're watching them. Are we concerned about them? No, I really don't think we are, for now at least. But the European ensembles shows it well. It picks up on this first wave that really cruises into the Caribbean, and then it picks up on the second wave. This is an ensemble run, so it puts together a bunch of runs to create one ensemble. But in general, in this ensemble run, it shows all the potential low pressures developing, but obviously there will just be one. It just, in general, it tries to tell us where geographically out here in the Atlantic there can be a tropical system that develops with two areas to really watch. Wave number one, wave number two right here. So what you're looking at here is sea surface temperatures for the Western Atlantic, the Gulf of Mexico, the Caribbean in general. So in general, you got low 80s out here, low to mid 80s. You start to get into the Gulf of Mexico and you are starting to heat up. There's a couple buoys out here that are showing 90 degrees sea surface temperatures. And in general, the water is warming at the surface, and a little bit further down from the surface is starting to warm up also. The Caribbean slowly starting to warm up, but it certainly will, but it's definitely supportive of tropical development and maintaining a tropical development in this region, which isn't completely unusual for this time of the year. So I know you're thinking 29 degrees Fahrenheit, that's pretty cold. Well, this is in Celsius, guys. So in general, if you're seeing 28, 27 degrees Celsius, that's in the low 80s. You start to get to 29, 30 degrees Celsius. That's starting to get into the mid 80s. So mid 80s is definitely supportive for tropical development. But in general, the last two things I'll show you here is this is shear at all levels of the atmosphere, basically. And in general, early on, as you can look at this weekend, really late this week, early this weekend, into the weekend, you notice the shear is high right here, what we talked about in the Eastern Caribbean. That's why we call this the graveyard. The trade winds are screaming. And then the conditions aloft wind-wise just aren't favorable. It really rips these systems apart. And, it just kind of rips any kind of convection apart from really developing with these tropical systems. But as we're working our way, until maybe late this weekend into early next week, there might be a small window for things to lessen somewhat and become a little bit more favorable. Is it very favorable? No, it's not. But you can tell shear, which is these more vibrant colors, begins to lessen somewhat. Therefore, there might be a better opportunity, a better window for tropical development in this region right here than there typically is this time of the year. Another thing I want to mention is dry air, moist air. So I talked about it earlier in the video. And in general, the areas in green that you see is moisture. The areas in brown that you see is dry air. So if you keep your eyes down here, the green areas is more moisture, brown areas are more dry air. So you see these tropical waves that work its way, fight off this dry air, the Saharan dry air from the dust, basically in North Africa. They get ate up, but then one comes after the other, helps moisten the environment behind it, and then this is able to feed off this moisture trail that it's leaving right here, creates somewhat of a moisture bubble, but these things will still be fighting dry air to its north. So it's not like these things have a great moist environment to really work into, which these tropical systems need. But, it could be much worse. It really could be. So we'll continue to figure out what's going to happen, guys. Sorry, I began to lose my voice about halfway through the video, so it got a little sloppy. But in general, stay aware. I'll keep you guys updated. I'm not going to make an update on this every night, but as we get a little bit closer, the confidence increases, which we'll keep you guys updated with what potentially could unfold over the next several days. Talk to y'all soon.